So I have actually sent the two video logs for you. So we have discussed about this particular poem in a nutshell, and we have discussed about the writer, and basically we discussed about the themes which are related to the poem and all the stanzas. Basically we find 6 stanzas. We have explained about the 6 stanzas as well. So when we refer to this poem, if you read the poem very carefully, I explained you, basically we have to have a very clear understanding about the clown's wife and clown's characters, right? So basically in this particular poem, we are highlighting 2 characters. Clown's wife is the person who is actually giving us a detailed description about clown's behavior. On the other hand, as literature students, we have to be very careful about clown's character as well, right? The behavioral pattern of the clown as well. So if you refer to the poem, you will clearly understand this poem is actually narrated from first-person narration. Even the audience will get to know about the clown and the behavioral patterns of the clown and what kind of troubles and tribunals, problems actually faced by the clown from the perspective of clown's wife. As the audience, even we will get the information about clown's life and clown's character from the clown's wife's description, the description given by the clown's wife. On the other hand, we should not underestimate clown's wife as well. When you read the poem very carefully, you will realize that this particular wife is a very much dedicated wife, right? This particular wife can be identified as a very much dedicated wife, right? But unfortunately, she has not identified about her husband properly. This is what we have to understand throughout the poem. That is what we call mistaken identity, right? Mistaken identity, or else we can reflect that the main theme of the poem is appearance versus reality. Most of the time, right, as human beings, we have the tendency to appreciate certain people. We have the tendency to reject certain people based on their outer appearance, right? We always check whether his outer appearance is beautiful, whether he looks like a gentleman, whether he is having a mobile phone of Apple 14, 13 Pro Max or whatever, Lamborghini or whatever. Like, based on these outer appearance, we come to conclusions about certain characters. But we don't know what kind of troubles and tribunals that they face in their day-to-day life. So when we reflect about this particular clown, his situation is also very similar to that. When we read about the clown's character, we will realize that, okay, the main aspect, the main action that a clown has to do is actually he has to make other people laugh. He is making audience happy. So we are under the impression, just like the clown's wife, we are under the impression that, okay, if this particular is making other people happy, definitely his life is also should be a very happy one, right? He may be a very much delightful character, very much enjoyable character, but when we refer to his life, when we analyze his character very carefully, we realize that there is no happiness at all. There is no happiness at all in his character. When we analyze his character, we will realize that, right? So that is why the wife says, right, when he comes out of work, right, he comes to the house like the carrying the entire world on his shoulders. That type of burden is there in his life. So this is what we discuss. So throughout the poem, make sure to remember appearance and reality can be identified as one of the major themes that we have to realize in this particular poem, right? So we should not actually judge a book by its cover. That is the main idea actually given in the poem. But unfortunately, the wife did not understand the real behavior of her husband. So according to my personal perspective, the wife tries to become the clown inside the house. So clown did not like that, because sometimes he may be acting or performing that particular role without any enthusiasm. We don't know, right? Even though he is making other people laugh, who knows that whether he likes that job or not? So when the wife is becoming a clown inside the house, what will happen? Definitely this person may think that, okay, even my wife has not given me proper recognition, right? So definitely that idea may be there. So that is why I explained you about the mistaken identity. So when we refer to the poem, make sure to remember, you have to remember the theme of appearance versus reality. Though he is actually appealing as a clown, make sure to remember his real life is something totally different. Not only for the audience, even his wife actually failed to understand, right? And on the other hand, we should not actually forget about the determination and courage, and what kind of selfless contribution is done by the clown's wife in order to make the clown happy. Today, my dear students, we are going to discuss about the poetic techniques, and after that, we will move on to target questions. So if you have completed your note, if you haven't completed your note, please make sure to go through the 2 videos that I have sent to you. That is important. Make sure to go through the videos. The videos will be available only for 1 month and they will be automatically disabled. So make sure to complete your notes. From the very beginning, you have to watch the videos. Then only you will understand the entire poem. Let's move on to the poetic techniques, because last week we completed our explanation. Now, when we refer to the poetic techniques, when you refer to the poetic techniques, we will realize that one of the major poetic techniques actually used in the poem can be identified as simple and colloquial language. Simple and colloquial language refers to whatever the poem, whatever the short story that you are going to write, you are going to use a very simple diction. Colloquial means the language that anybody can understand, whether you are a studious person or else a very much wise person or else average person or else a stupid person. Our day-to-day lifestyle, our day-to-day language is known to be colloquial language. Now, when you read this particular poem, unlike to the Evening Star by William Blake, where you have a lot of difficult words. You may have done that poem. We have done that poem in the class, to the Evening Star by William Blake, a very difficult poem to understand because of archaic language. You have to be very much familiar with archaic language in order to understand that poem. But when you refer to this poem, my dear students, you don't find very difficult words when it comes to this poem. The reason is actually the diction or use of language is very much usual, right? There are no very difficult words, heavy words actually used by the poet in order to write the poem, right? The poem is very simple. The message is also very simple. Anybody can understand, whether you are doing literature or not, right? You can very easily understand. That can be identified as the major poetic technique. What is the major poetic technique? Simple language, colloquial language, simple diction, right? That is what we call the first poetic technique that we are going to discuss today. And after that, we have another very powerful poetic technique. I hope you guys can see the screen. Make sure to write down. Even though you are getting the recording, I always ask you to write down, because writing part is very much important. In this class, you have to write down the note. When the teacher is explaining the lesson, you guys have to continue your notes, right? Otherwise, you will get the recording. But with recording, you can't do a lot, right? So then and there, finish your note, finish your work, then that will be very much easier for you to study and very much easier for you to get ready with your work. Now, irony can be identified as a very popular technique, right? He gives laughter to the others on the stage, but he himself is unhappy and his wife must cheer him up at home. So what do you mean by irony? Now, irony can be identified as a very popular technique when it comes to literature, right? Not only in this particular poem, but also in other poems, we refer to irony. Now, what do you mean by irony in literature? This is a very popular word, right? In Sinhala, this word is known to be utprasaya, right? In Sinhala literature, this is known to be utprasaya. Where, what do you mean by irony? What is said is not what is meant, right? What is said is not what is meant, right? That is what we call irony. What is said is not what is meant. This is what we call irony, right? So basically, when it comes to irony, there are 3 types of irony in literature. We can divide irony into 3 different categories, actually, when it comes to literature. Basically, we have verbal irony, right? We have verbal irony, where the irony is generated from words. That is what we call verbal irony. Then we have dramatic irony, right? Then we have dramatic irony, right? Then we have situational irony, right? Then we have situational irony. So as literature students, you have to pay your attention very carefully when it comes to these 3 types of ironies. These 3 types are very much important when it comes to English literature. So if you are studying English literature as a subject, you have to be very careful about different types of irony. Doesn't matter what is the poem that you are going to study. Doesn't matter what is the drama that you are going to study. It is essential to have some kind of idea about irony, because this is one of the major techniques when it comes to literature. So irony means what is said is not what is meant. So you actually said something, but you are referring to something totally different. You may have said something using certain words, but you are going to emphasize something else. Can you understand? That is what we call irony, right? We have a very beautiful poem in our syllabus. I think we have not done that yet. We have a poem called Boy is Kind by Stephen Gray. What is the title of the poem? Boy is Kind. Now we all know that boy is not kind, right? So that is a very good example for verbal irony, right? Boy is kind, but we all know that boy is not kind actually, right? In reality, we all know that boy is not kind. Actually, war can be identified as a situation which is very much unkind. But in order to show the unkind situation, unkind, pathetic results of war, the poet has used the word boy is kind. So that is actually erupted from the words, right? From the words, from the word of mouth. Boy is kind. We have not used anything to erupt that irony. So as a result of that, that irony is known to be verbal irony, where you are going to emphasize the irony using your own words from the mouth. Boy is kind. We all know that boy is not kind. Boy is very much unkind. Boy is cruel. Boy is brutal. So in order to give the message to the audience, you will think twice. Really, boy is kind or boy is unkind? So that is what we call verbal irony. Verbal irony, right? Then we have dramatic irony. What do you mean by dramatic irony? This is another piece of irony that we use in literature, right? Most of the time, dramatic irony actually occurs in dramas. What do you mean by dramatic irony? Right? What do you mean by dramatic irony? In dramatic irony, what happens? When we refer to dramatic irony, what happens? Right? The characters don't know what happens next, but the audience is very much aware about that. That is what we call dramatic irony. Can you understand? Now, as an example, if we take a situation like this, now we have a very beautiful story, The Gift of the Magi. You may have actually read the story there. We have a beautiful girl who has long hair, right? She's a very poor girl, but she has a very long hair. Everybody admired her because of her hair. And there was another poor boy, he only had a wristwatch. The only thing that he received in his life as something precious is this particular wristwatch. Now, at the end of the day, they marry, and both of them decide individually that they have to give a gift on the Christmas Eve to this particular partner. So the boy, what did he do? He actually sold his watch and he bought a comb to that particular girl. But the girl didn't know about this. The girl didn't know about this. The boy had only the wristwatch. So he sold the wristwatch and he bought a comb. And the comb will be very much useful to the girl because then she can comb her hair because she has got long hair. And then what did the girl do? She actually cut her hair and she sold her hair and she bought a beautiful box to the boy. Then the boy can actually keep that particular watch in that box safely. But the boy did not know about this. But as the audience, we knew about that. At the end of the day, they meet and they actually share their gifts and they realize that they have actually sold the most precious physical things that they have received in order to give the best for their partner. So my dear students, now I hope you can understand what do you mean by dramatic irony. The characters don't know what is going to happen. They are not aware what is going to happen, but as the audience, we know what is going to happen. Even though the boy did not know that, the girl has actually removed her hair in order to buy her beautiful box to put his watch, right? We knew that. Even though the girl does not know, the boy has actually already sold his watch in order to buy a comb to give to that girl. Even though the girl did not know that, we knew it. That is what we call dramatic irony. The characters are unaware what is going to happen, but as the audience, we know what is going to happen. That is what we call dramatic irony. I hope you guys can understand. So most of the time, dramatic irony occurs in dramas, right? Remember, characters are not aware what is going to happen, but as the audience, we are aware what is going to happen. That is what we call dramatic irony. And finally, my dear students, we have situational irony. We have situational irony, right? So situational irony refers to what you expect in that particular situation will never occur. Something totally different will occur in that particular situation. That is what we call situational irony. In certain situations, you are expecting something to happen. Now, as an example, just imagine about an accident. Just imagine about an accident. So what are you expecting? You are expecting, okay, the ambulance will come quickly and they will take all these injured people to the hospital. That is what you expect. But then what will happen? The ambulance will face an accident. At the end of the day, the general public has to take the people who came, the drivers and all the hospital attendants, the general public has to take those people into the hospital. That is what we call situational lighting. Another example, you have put money in the bank. You have the idea that, okay, the money will be saved inside the bank. But unfortunately, you will get to know that the bank was robbed by a set of thieves. So that is what we call situational lighting, right? You never expect that to happen, but that is what actually happened at the end of the day. So can you understand the three perspectives of irony? Very much important. Verbal irony, what you said is not what you meant. Dramatic irony, right? The characters don't know what is going to happen, but the audience is very much aware of that, what is going to happen. And the situational irony, you expect something in that particular situation, but that thing will never occur. Something totally unexpected will occur in that particular situation. That is what we call situational irony. So as literature students, you have to be very aware of these three types of ironies in literature. Situational irony and verbal irony are very much important. If we refer to this particular poem, The Clown's Wife by Johnson Nagard, situational irony can be seen in almost all the places. If you can remember, in the second stanza, if you read very carefully, you will realize that the wife says, up there he is a king on a throne. Up there means on the stage when he is performing his act, right? Up there, right, in the circus, he is known to be a king on the throne, right? But soon after he came home, you can hear him mourn, right? So that is actually totally different, contradictory behavior, right? Situational irony. What do we expect? Okay, if he has performed really well on the stage, he should perform in the same way, right? Inside the house as well. That is what the wife actually expected from him. Wife is expecting that, okay, he is performing really well on the stage. So I believe that my wife will perform in the same manner soon after he comes to the house. But unfortunately, that is not going to happen. That is what we call situational irony. There is no verbal irony. Situational irony can be seen, right? We are expecting the clown to act in a quite humorous, happy and delightful manner, not only on the stage, but also inside the house. But that is not going to happen. My dear students, that is not going to happen. That is what we call situational irony. Even though he makes other people laugh on the stage, he will not be able to make his wife happy. And most importantly, the wife will realize that this particular person is totally unhappy. But what we expect, okay, if you are a joker, if you can make us happy, right, definitely you will be much more happier than us. That is our mentality, right? Okay, if you are a joker, you are making other people happy, so your life will be much more delighted than ours, because like you are a happy person by nature. By nature, you are a happy person. No, he is not happy. He is not happy, right? So it is completely opposite, contradictory situation. So that is what we call situational irony. Can you understand? Situational irony. So basically, we discussed two poetic techniques today. We are discussing about Clown's Wife by Johnson Nagard, one of the most famous poems included in your English literature syllabus, right? We have completed the entire 6 stanzas and we have explained all the difficult words, and today we are discussing about the poetic techniques. Under that, my dear students, we discussed about the first poetic technique, that is diction, using very simple colloquial language. Then anybody can understand the poem without having any problem. Then the second poetic technique that we discussed today is actually the situational irony, right? Where what is expected from the particular clown is not actually performed by him. Then the third poetic technique that I am going to highlight here is that the certain grammar mistakes or else the uneducatedness of this particular clown's wife is quite clearly portrayed by referring to the grammar mistakes that she makes in this particular poem. If you read the poem very carefully, you can realize that she makes a couple of grammar mistakes that clearly shows us what kind of uneducated character she is. That is also something very much important that you have to highlight, right? Her uneducatedness, she is not that much educated. That part is clearly shown to us by referring to her grammar mistakes when we refer to her stanza in the book. So these are the first three techniques that I have highlighted. If you have any questions, make sure to ask. We will go to the explanation. Make sure to write down. If you have any problems, please make sure to ask. Hurry up and write down. I need 5 students to complete. Soon after you have finished, please pass me a message. I will move on to the next part. Right, I hope that you guys have completed. We will move on to the next part. Right. Right, okay. We will move on to the next part. Right, okay. So we have discussed about three techniques, actually, three poetic techniques related to this particular poem. First one is the colloquial language or using simple language. Second one can be identified as situational irony. I explained you how irony works when it comes to English literature. Basically, we have three forms of irony: dramatic irony, verbal irony, and situational irony. All three ironies are very much important for you as literature students. most of the time, verbal irony and situational irony are very much highlighted when it comes to your syllabus. Certain grammar errors can be seen, shows the educational level of this particular wife. I do me best, I do me latest, I have a borrow. So this kind of grammar mistakes will clearly emphasize us this particular woman is not that much educated. So the educational level of this particular woman is also highlighted in this particular poem. We will move on to other poetic techniques. I hope you guys can see the screen. When we refer to the poem very carefully, my dear students, we can realize there are certain metaphors and similes. So what is the difference between a metaphor and a simile? When we refer to a metaphor is a direct comparison. Now, as an example, my sister's face is a flower. So you are directly comparing your sister's face into a flower. That is what we call direct comparison, a metaphor, right? A simile can be identified as an indirect comparison. You are indirectly comparing your sister's face into a flower. As an example, my sister's face is like a flower. So there you have an indirect comparison. So metaphor is a direct comparison and simile can be identified as an indirect comparison. So when we refer to this particular poem, we have metaphor. Up there, he is a king on a throne. So the clown is directly compared to a king, right? So that is quite true because we know that what kind of special place is given to a king, right? Because the king is the person who is actually administrating the entire country, right? So the entire power is actually vested upon him. So when it comes to the circus, the clown is the person who is actually controlling the entire crowd, right? If the clown is not performing well, definitely the circus will be boring. So people will not pay money and people will not come to see the entertainment. So this is what you have to understand, right? So the comparison is quite compatible, right? It's quite successful, right? And quite appropriate, right, as well. Then we have poor soul. Poor soul. So the clown is actually compared to a poor soul by the wife. So wife is totally upset because the wife never thought that her husband will behave in this manner because especially he is making other people happy. Again, we are coming to the point of irony, right? He is making other people happy, but even though he is making other people happy, he does not know how to become happy himself, right? He does not know how to keep happiness in his life. So again, we can understand, my dear students, here we have that irony, at the same time we have the metaphor as well. Then we have a simile, seems to have world on his shoulders, right? That is another powerful technique, right? Where the clown's wife explains that the burden of the clown can be clearly visible when he is actually moving into the house after removing all these costumes, right? So she says, he is actually carrying something on his shoulders like a huge burden. So this burden is actually compared to the world. So the clown's wife is actually seeing the clown as the giant Atlas, right? According to Greek mythology, the great Atlas giant is actually keeping the entire world on his shoulders. So here, the clown's wife is actually comparing the clown into Atlas giant, the giant Atlas, right? Who is keeping the entire world on his shoulders according to Greek mythology. Now, then the entire poem is actually reflected in first person narration. So the narrative point is also something very much important grade 10 students should be aware of, right? The narrative point is in Sinhala known to be the Drushtikonaya in Sinhala, right? Basically, we have in Sinhala Uttama Purusha Drushtikonaya, Madhyama Purusha Drushtikonaya, Prathama Purusha Drushtikonaya. Likewise, in Sinhala literature also we have. In literature, in English literature, we are referring to that as first person narration. So if you are using I and we as pronouns, that is known to be the first person narration. And then you have second person narration if you are using you, they. And then you have third person narration if you are using any other nouns when it comes to that particular novel, short story, or else the poem. So here, right, the entire story is actually given to us by the clown's wife. And even though clown's wife is actually explaining about the clown, we should not underestimate the clown's wife's contribution as well. That is also important. So here we have three poetic techniques. We have metaphor, we have simile, and this is known to be a narrative poem where the poet is trying to tell us a story. Right? The poet is trying to tell us a story. As a result of that, this is known to be a narrative poem. Right? The narration is there in the poem, so it is known to be a narrative poem. So these are the basic techniques that you have to follow. So hurry up and write down. Please pass me a message if you have finished. Hurry up. Right. I hope that you guys have completed. We will move on to the next part. Right. Okay. Very good. Right. Well done. Okay. We will move on to the next part. Right. Right. Very good. Okay. Let's move on to the other techniques. Right. Now we are going to discuss about the theme of the poem. So when it comes to poetry, my dear students, right, make sure to understand, right, your poetry book, if you take the anthology, you will realize that it is actually divided into almost all the poems are actually divided into several themes, right? Basically, you have 5 themes: nature, society, humor, conflict, nature, society, humor, conflict, and you have another one, right? So these are the basic themes that you have, right? When you refer to the poetry part, these are the basic themes. Now, if you take the theme of nature, basically we have To the Evening Star by William Blake. Obviously, the evening star is known to be the goddess Venus, right? The goddess Venus is actually belong to nature. Then we have Eagle by Alfred Lord Tennyson. Obviously, eagle is actually a product of nature. Then we have To the Nile by John Keats. The Nile River is also again a product of nature, right? So if you refer to most of the poems, right, that we refer under the category of nature, we are discussing about the beauty of nature. Most of the time, romantic poets can be identified there, including William Blake and John Keats. Now, this particular poem is actually discussing about something very much important about the society, right? So when we live in the society, we face this kind of terrible incidents, right? We have the tendency of believing people based on their outer appearance, whether we like it or not. That is how we are going to judge people, right? The word judging is something very much important. We tend to judge people based on their outer appearance, based on their language, based on their characteristics. We have the tendency of judging people. That is something very common. That is something very common when it comes to our society, not only in our society. That is the normal scenario if you refer to the entire world. The Clown's Wife is a poem that examines the theme of appearance versus reality. So this is a very powerful theme when it comes to literature. Doesn't matter whether you are grade 10 or 11 or 12 or 13, right? Appearance versus reality, when we refer to literature, right? Appearance versus reality can be identified as one of the most significant literature points that you have to highlight, right? Appearance versus reality, right? So subjects like literature, subjects like science, are there in order to identify, in order to analyze the reality and understand the reality, because most of the time we have the tendency of understanding the appearance. So here when we refer to the Clown's Wife also, she had the same problem. She identified her husband, okay, my husband is a clown. So she did not understand her husband is a husband soon after he comes to the house, right? So she thought that, okay, my husband is a clown, so he should perform the same act, the same performance inside the house as well. This is what we call mistaken identity. This is how the Clown's Wife thought. She thought that, okay, if he can perform his actions there on the stage, soon after he comes to the house, he should perform in the same manner. He should perform in the same manner, right? That is what she thought. But in reality, the situation is totally different. Up there, it's true that he is performing because that is his job, that is his occupation, right? So he will earn money from that. But soon after he comes to the house, he can behave the way he wants. He can behave the way he wants, right? So if we are not giving at least that freedom to this particular person, right, then there is a problem, right? If we are not ready to give, if the wife is not ready to give even that freedom to this particular person, definitely there is a conflict. Can you understand? So the entire situation is actually occurring because of mistaken identity. The entire situation is occurring because of mistaken identity. We will move on. It's the idea that things are not really how they appear, right? So even we think that with the clown's costume and everything, right, we will realize the fellow is like a clown, okay, he's making other people happy. But We don't know whether he is actually engaging in that particular job, kind of a happy mood or else a sad mood. We don't know, right? Most of the people actually engaging in different types of jobs because they don't have any alternative at all, right? So we have to understand this reality, right? This is what we have to understand. So if you are doing literature as a subject, you should never judge a book by its cover. That is the most powerful message that we are going to encompass with students. The clown goes to earth where he is a king on a throne. Yes, right? So it means that he is performing really well. As a human being, he is performing really well. There are people like that, right? When it comes to their work, when it comes to their job, they perform really well. They are really good performers, right? Why do they do like that? Because that is their job, right? That is their survival method. If they do not perform well, what will happen? They won't be able to survive. So the clown is also doing something like that. In order to survive, he should work. So he should perform, right? So it is actually a performance-based job. Teacher, clown, lawyer, it is actually a performance-based job. If your performance is good, definitely people will like you. If your performance is not good enough, then there is a negative consequences. So this is what you have to understand, right? This image indicates that he is a very good at what he does. As a clown, he dresses in a costume and paints his face in a way that brings smiles and laughter to people. Then he spends his days as a comic performer entertaining audiences with jokes, physical humor, and tricks. However, the reality for the clown in the poem is that he is depressed. Even though he made other people laugh, even though he made other people happy, even though he made the day of other people, at the end of the day, what we can realize after reading this poem, my dear students, his life is depressed. He is totally depressed, right? So that is what we call ironical. On the other hand, that is what we call contrast, right? Contrast. Or else, if you are comparing that to a theme, this is what we call appearance versus reality. So we only see the appearance of the clown, but we don't know what kind of real troubles and tribunals actually faced by this particular person. Even the wife didn't have any idea about that. If you read the first stanza, right, when the question is raised from the wife about my husband, the clown, what could I say? She's starting the entire poem with a rhetorical question about my husband, the clown, what could I say? Even she doesn't have any idea about this particular person. So that clearly shows us it is very difficult to understand people. It's very difficult to understand, right? So we should never try to understand people. What we try to do is that we have to understand their situations, right? So you should never try to understand, you should never judge a person by the person's outside appearance. That is the moral message actually provided in this poem. Hurry up and write down. Please pass me a message. If you have finished, then we will move on to the next part. Right, okay, I hope that you guys have completed. Right, okay. So the basic theme you can understand, right? If you have any questions, you can ask. I have given enough time for you to write down, right? So if you have any questions, you can always use the chat section, right? I have disabled talking because due to a lot of voice, it will be a disturbance for the audience in order to understand the story. We will move on. He can barely get through the doors of his home before he is mourning and appears as though he has the world on his shoulders. So we discussed about that. So the burden, what kind of burden can it be? It can be about a financial burden. He may be suffering from some kind of financial problems because we know that when it comes to a clown, right, the payment will not be that much sufficient. The remuneration package will not be that much a sufficient one in order to survive because it's not a professional job. Even though he is doing a professional job, it is not actually identified as a professional job like a lawyer, a doctor, or an engineer, right? So then there is a problem, right? So that is what you have to pay attention. Refer to the record, right? So he can barely get through the doors of his home before he is mourning, and now itself start writing. Don't wait until the teacher is moving away. Now itself start writing. You have to write. Basically, you have to listen to the lecture and write down. You have to do both, right? He can barely get through the doors of his home before he is mourning and appears as though he has the world on his shoulders. The world on his shoulders clearly suggests us the idea that the burden actually felt by him. We don't know what is this burden, but definitely even the wife understood that there is some kind of a burden. So how can he be happy? He can't actually act in front of his wife, right? He can't act like that, right? The clown is living a dual life. Audience would think he lives very happily as he is full of smiles and life while he is out on stage. But his happiness is a pretense. So he is pretending. He is pretending. He is actually showing something else. So it is kind of a dual life like Jagannath, right? A dual life. So the audience may think that, okay, this person is happy, he is performing really well. Audience still think like that. But the reality is something totally different. That is what we call dual life, appearance versus reality. You have to highlight this and show when you are writing answers, right? This is what we can see. This is what we can understand. So I have highlighted that in the previous videos. Please go through the previous videos. Right. As he is full of smiles and life while he is on stage, but his happiness is a pretense. The clown's wife is the only one who knows the sad truth, and ironically, she spends her time clowning around trying to cheer him up. Unfortunately, the problem is actually the clown's wife actually knew about this particular problem. The clown's wife actually knew about this particular problem, but she did not provide a considerable solution. Right? We don't know, Akil. We can't say like that, right? We don't know. Sometimes he may be suffering from a cancer. He may be suffering from some kind of he may have some kind of another affair, right? We don't know, right? Sometimes he does not want to share his feelings with his wife because most of the feelings are actually dealing with suffocation, right? So there can be reasons like that. We don't know, right? There can be reasons like that. So this is what we have to understand when it comes to this particular point. This is the reality that we all have to understand. Even the wife can't understand the real situation of this particular person. Even the wife can't understand, right? So this is what we have to understand. So it is very difficult to understand people, right? Even though you associate them very closely. Now, wife is the closest person, right? Wife can be identified as the closest person, but even she fails to understand this particular person. Even she fails to understand. So this is what we have to highlight. Even wife fails to understand this particular person, right? So this is the major theme that we are going to highlight in this particular point. So whatever the questions that you will get, they will be based on this particular theme. Hurry up and write down. Please pass me a message. Right, okay. I hope that you guys have completed. Now we are moving to target questions. Right? I hope you guys have completed. Make sure to write fast. I have said you several times. When it comes to your ordinary level paper, you will have only 30 minutes. For one question, you will have 30 minutes. You have to write 2.5 pages with 4 quotations. Right? If you are doing literature, you have to face this truth, whether you like it or not. Most of the students, they face the time problem, time management. They can't manage their time. The main reason is that they are not writing fast. You have to write fast because we are not referring to beautiful handwriting or else cursive writing or something like that. If we can identify your writing, that is more than enough, right? So we are referring to that. So definitely you will run out of time. So that is why I am asking you to write. Otherwise, I can provide you the entire photocopy. I'm not going to do like that. Students should write. They have to write. If you can't write, you should not select literature as a subject. If you can't write, because dancing students, they dance, right? Music students, they play their instruments, right? Students who are doing art, they draw with watercolors. So literature students, what do? They write. Without that is the basic skill that you have to perform, because you can't go there and you can't give a speech. Good morning, my dear teachers. I'm going to give a speech about clown's fight. You have to write and show. So writing plays a very important role. Write fast. You have to practice that. That is a skill that you have to practice. You can't do literature like that. You will definitely run out of time. You can't do literature like that, right? You have to write fast. You have to practice that, right? Previously, you won't have that skill, but now you have to practice that skill. That is why we are providing notes that you have to write. Without writing, you will never be able to do this. We are coming to our first target question. Let's write down the target question and we will discuss. What is the question that they have given to us? The contrast between the entertainer and the human is vividly portrayed by Johnson Nagard in his poem The Clown's Fight. So basically, they have given us two characters here. If you refer to this question very carefully, you will realize that there are two particular sets, right? If you pay your attention, you will realize that two particular sets, right? You have the entertainer. You have the entertainer's role, and then you have the human. The human is known to be the husband. If you use another word actually for this human, you can use the word husband, right? The question is about the husband, right? And then you have the entertainer. Entertainer is the clown. In simple words, right? The entertainer is known to be the clown. So first and foremost, you have to understand these two characters in the poem. Can you understand? First and foremost, you have to understand these two characters in the poem, right? The human means the husband. Without all these funny clothes and costumes, that can be identified as the husband. Then what do we have? The entertainer. Entertainer means, right, the clown. So what was the question? Contrast. Right, contrast. This is the most important word that you have to highlight. Contrast. The contrast between the entertainer and the human is vividly portrayed. Vividly portrayed, right? Vividly portrayed by Johnson Nagard in his poem The Clown's Fight. Discuss. So basically, we have two people here. Who are the two people, right? We have entertainer and we have the human. The entertainer is known to be the clown and the human is known to be the husband. So their roles are totally different. So here, contrast because their roles are totally different, right? That is what you have to understand. So if you are getting ready for this question, you have to understand. Basically, the question can be divided into two parts. This particular question can be divided into two parts, right? You can divide this into two parts, right? They have actually divided the question. They have used the word entertain, right? They have used the word entertainer instead of the word clown. So actually we have a clown here. Clown can be identified as the entertainer. Then they have used the word human, right? So what is the idea behind the human? Human refers to the clown. Sorry, the husband. Human refers to the husband, right? So what was the question? The question is actually known to be the contrast. So contrast, what do you mean by the contrast? Contrast means the differences, right? The differences of their characteristics, right? So you have to highlight the differences. Contrast means differences, right? So up there, he is a king on a throne, right? Up there, right? He is a king on a throne. That is the entertainer, right? That is the entertainer. Can you understand? Very simple, right? Up there, he is a king on a throne. That is known to be the entertainer. But when you, right? When he comes home, you can hear him moan. right? When he comes home, what will happen? Right? When he comes home, you can hear him more. Right? You can hear him more. Right? You can hear him more. This is the reality. Right? So, as an entertainer, right? As an entertainer, right? Yeah, we can see most of the positive characteristics. Right? Most of the positive feelings can be seen. Right? If you take him as a human being, most of the negative characteristics are actually highlighted by the wife. Most of the negative characteristics, right? Right? And he is carrying a huge burden. Right? He is carrying a huge burden. He is carrying a huge burden. The wife is actually comparing him to be a poor soul. Right? The wife is actually comparing him to be a poor soul. So he is a very good performer. These are the two aspects that you have to understand before writing the answer. If you have understood these two aspects, right, you can very easily write an answer. Don't start and write. Just have this in your mind. How am I going to analyze the question? Students, how am I going to analyze the question? So this is how you are going to analyze, right? Basically, you have a question. When you refer to the question, when you read the question, you identified actually two parts, right? Number one, entertainer. Number two, human. So entertainer means the clown. Human means the husband. So contrast means, what do you mean by the contrast? Contrast means differences. How the poet has shown the different lifestyles, different behavioral patterns, different situations. Yeah, that's one. Differences. They are asking differences. Right? But you have to have quotations. If you don't have quotations, then you are facing a problem. That is why we are asking you to study the entire poem. If you are doing literature, that is why literature becomes one of the most difficult subjects. One of the most difficult subjects. Right? If you don't provide quotations, you will not get marks. You can explain like this, but no point. You have to have evidence in order to prove your fact. That is why most of the lawyers, magistrates, they have done literature when they were schooling, including Kumar Sangatta. Literature students, they have their viewpoint and they have evidence to prove that. Your problem is you have the viewpoint, but you don't have evidence. So your case is null and void. Nobody will refer to your case. Can you understand? That's the difference. That is literature. That is literature. You have to have points. You can't blabber, right? You can't blabber, right? This is what happens. This is what happens. No. Okay, whatever happens. What is the proof? What is the proof? The proof is the poem. Evidence. Without evidence, nobody will understand. Nobody will accept your answer. So this is the overall idea. This is the overall idea. Based on this overall idea, now you can create something in your mind. Basically, I have two parts. So in my question, I am going to highlight the entertainer's part, as well as I am going to highlight the natural, normal, average human being's character as well. I am going to highlight the both. You have to think in that perspective. Otherwise, you will not be able to understand the story. This is what you have to pay your attention. Very good. Now, first and foremost, we have to start with the introduction. Introductory paragraph is something very much important. So, in the introductory paragraph, we are going to give two things. Number one, we are going to explain about the poet. Number two, we are going to give some kind of description, some kind of summary about the particular poem that we are going to study, that we are going to write answers. Right? Small summary should be given. So my introductory paragraph can be totally different from your introductory paragraph. I'm not asking you to write the same introductory paragraph. My idea is totally different from your idea, but basically our paragraphs should contain the same facts, same ideas, right? At the end of the day, you have to give some information about the poet and some information about the poem as well. Both these things you have to highlight. That is important. Being a British playwright, poet, short story, and children's writer, Johnson Nagard has traveled extensively throughout the world, performing his poetry. Most of the experiences he gathered for writing his poetry through these travels. Clown's Wife is a poem written by him which endorses the dual nature possessed by any human being in the world. So, according to my opinion, I have said that dual. We are not dual, right? We have more than double. I'm pretty sure we have more than double, right? We have more than double. We have more than double. In front of this camera, I am a teacher. In front of my mother, I am a son. In front of my brother, I am a brother. In front of the audience, I will be a performer. So we have more than dual. No, we have more than dual. We have more than two characteristics. We have to agree with that, right? More than dual, right? Most of the experiences he gathered for writing his poetry through these travels. Clown's Wife is a poem written by him which endorses the dual nature possessed by any human being in the world. This is widely portrayed by Johnson by referring to number of literary techniques, including contrast. So contrast is a very powerful poetic technique. In order to build up the contrast, irony is used as a very popular technique. Now, when we refer to poetic techniques, we did not refer to contrast. Actually, we cannot take contrast there. But in order to make contrast, irony is used as a very powerful technique. By using irony, what do? We are making a powerful contrast. Irony is actually used to create contrast. So that is what we are going to write. When we are writing answers, there are some key points that we have to remember. That is, the word contrast should be there. There should be two characters. We have the entertainer and we have the human, right? And vividly portray the clown's wife. So we have to give the quotations as well. So this is my introductory paragraph. And after this, I will directly move on to my explanation. So hurry up and write down. I will give you 2 to 3 minutes. Start writing. Hurry up. Once 2 students have finished, we will move on. So hurry up. That's important. Hurry up. Right, I hope you guys have completed. A couple of new students, I hope that they can survive. Make sure to go through the previous videos. I hope you guys can survive, right? Right, okay. Right, shall we move on to the next part? Please pass me a message. Right, okay, very good. Now we are moving to the explanation. Right, okay. Now we are directly moving to the explanation. Now some students, they are giving lengthy paragraphs as the introductory paragraph. That is not what you should do. It is actually very much foolish. Yes, it is essential to provide an introductory paragraph. It doesn't mean that for more than 25 to 30 minutes you have to waste for an introductory paragraph. Just give the introductory paragraph, then and there, include the most important essential information that you have to include, and then move on to the next the question. Start writing the answer. That's it, right? From the second paragraph onwards, you have to continue with your answers, right? So you should not actually pay your attention towards the question. Definitely you have to move on, right? Whether you like it or not. The poem is a narration presented by Clown's wife about her husband, Clown. Wife does not have clear idea about her husband's behavior, thoughts, and ambitions. This is depicted in the first line of the first stanza. Then she moves on to his behavior and characteristics, which are vividly presented to us by the poet using contrast and comparison. On the stage, he becomes the king, and soon after he came home, she can hear him mourn. So here we can understand the behavior of the entertainer, at the same time the human being. So I have told you the entertainer refers to the clown, right? The clown's performance is tip-top. He is doing quite well, right? So that is what we have given here. On stage, he's a different person. On stage, he's a different person. So as an entertainer, right, he's performing really well. So points are going up, contrast. But soon after he becomes a husband, a natural, normal, average human being, what will happen? You can hear him mourn. So this is what I have shown here. So this is what we discuss as contrast. At the same time, this is what we call irony. I'm telling you again and again, we use irony in order to build up contrast. We use irony in order to build up contrast. That is what we do. That is what we do, right? So we have situational irony. We expect that, okay, the wife will perform really well. Soon after he comes home as well. No, he's not going to perform in the house the same manner that he performed on the stage. That is not going to happen. That is not going to happen, right? That is not going to happen. So that is what we call contrast, contradiction, contrast. Very important. So hurry up and write down. Please pass me the message. You have to continue. Some students are waiting to take the recording. Yes, you can get the recording. There is no doubt about that. You are eligible to get the recording, but make sure to remind, recording is there for emergency purposes. If you can participate to the class, this is an online class, definitely make sure to participate and then and there finish it off. I will tell you what will happen otherwise. All the recordings will get together and will be collected. So definitely you have to pay your attention, and then you have to pay your extra time to go through the recordings. And at the end of the day, you will give up the subject because you have a lot of work to do. So this is not an ordinary subject. No, right? This is difficult, right? So you know that. I don't have to explain that. So, right? Basically, you have to have some kind of good knowledge, basic English knowledge about this particular language in order to do literature. If your language is really terrible, right? There is a red warning. So make sure to remember that and make sure to compare your work, complete your work then and there. Then you will have enough time. Right. I hope you guys have completed. Hurry up and write down. I need 5 students to complete. Hurry up. Writing is very much important. Please make sure to follow my plan. You know how we have actually came to the end of sweets, but in your school, they have not even started. They have not even started, right? So this is the specialty in our class. We will do our work and we will finish our work. Then we have enough time to do the revision. We have enough time to do the revision. And most importantly, after each and every poem, we will do target questions as well. After each and every poem, after each and every short story, we will definitely do all the target questions as well. So that is a very powerful plus point that you can take. Very powerful plus point. Right? So make sure to take the maximum advantage from that. Okay, most of the students have completed. We will move on. Right, good, good. Right. So now we have shown the contrast. We have used the word as well. Contrast, right? So contrast is something very much important. We have shown that this is how the entertainer behaves. Using a simile, the poet has actually mentioned about that. And this is how the human being or else the husband behaves inside the house. So they are so much distant. They are so much distant, right? So that is what we have to understand. Right, okay. So we will move on from there. Dual characteristics of the clown is clearly emphasized in the above stanza. He is an entertainer on the stage. Once he came home, he is not a joker, but a normal, natural human being. Nobody understands this reality, not even clown's wife. This mistaken identity leads to the theme of the poem. Inside the house, he is not an entertainer. He is a human being. The poet suggests the idea that once he removed all those fancy clothes and costumes, he has redeemed from his profession. Redeemed from his profession. He is carrying a huge burden, right? He is carrying a huge burden. So this is what you have to write. Don't forget to use words which are included in the question. That is a very powerful technique that literature students can perform, literature students can practice when they are writing answers. When we refer to a question, there are certain words that we have to highlight, right? So it is better that you can use those words when you are writing answers. Why am I telling like that? Because then the person who is marking your paper will get to know that this particular boy or girl is writing according to the question, because she has not forgotten to mention the words. Now I have used the words like natural, human being, entertainer. These words I have used. Now why I have used them? Because then the person who is marking your paper will realize that, okay, this particular student is actually using all these words accordingly in order to write answers, which means that he is writing actually according to the question. He's writing according to the question. So that is another trick that you can follow when it comes to answering questions. Please pass me a message if you have finished. Hurry up. It is actually your problem because I can't help it that is your school. But in other schools, they are not going to have their exams in October. So it will take some time to cover up. Because, however, I don't think that in your school you have completed the novel. So that can be taken as a plus point. So you can go through the poems. But we are working, we are doing our lessons according to the normal school format. So we will try our level best to complete. Otherwise, we can't help because we are targeting the O-level exam. Right. So if you have finished, please pass me a message. Hurry up. Right, okay, we will move on to the next part. I hope you guys have completed. He must carry that burden like a real human being. He can't become a clown in serious situations. So my insight is quite different about this poem. He can't become a clown, even though his job is a clown, he can't become a clown. He may be, definitely he is the breadwinner of the family, so you have to provide for the family. He can't become a clown, he should be a serious person. Unfortunately, the wife could not understand this. That is a different case, that is a different scenario, right? We will keep it aside. Right, let's keep it aside, right? Just think about the situation now. He cannot be a clown. How can he become a clown actually, right? You have to understand he's a very serious person. He has to face, he has to burn, he's the breadwinner of the family, so he has to earn electricity bill, water bill, right? Other expenses. So he has to earn, right? He must carry that burden like a real human being. He can't become a clown in serious situations. But the society, including his wife, expected him to be the same entertainer forever, which he did not enjoy. That is the problem. Mistaken identity. Mistaken identity. Right? Mistaken identity. The wife expected that my husband should be a clown forever. He should laugh. He should show all the performance inside the house. He should entertain me always. No. That is his job. He will perform that job and he will earn some money and he will come to the house as a natural, normal human being. So there is a huge contrast. Try to understand, right? So this is what we call mistaken identity. But the society, including his wife, expected him to be the same entertainer forever, which he didn't enjoy. This is the reality. Even his wife does not seem to understand. This is the contrast between the entertainer and the human being. See, I have used the words directly from the question. Entertainer and the human being. I have really used the word clown and the husband because in the question they have given us two words, two separate words actually. What are the words that they have given? Entertainer and the human being. They have given us two separate words, right? So the moment he walks through that door without the red nose and the funny clothes, he seems to have the world on his shoulders. So here, the last point clearly shows us the real burden actually taken by him as a breadwinner of the family. He is the breadwinner of the family. He has to earn whether other people likes it or not. He has to earn money. In the previous two lines, we can understand that his behavior as a clown. So he will be identified as a clown, right, based on his costumes, right? Based on his costumes. Without costumes, we don't know whether he's a clown or not. So the costumes also play an important role. We have to pay attention to that one as well. So hurry up and write down. Please pass me a message if you have finished. We are writing target questions. Hurry up. We have to finish it off today itself. We will move on to a next question next week and we will start the most difficult poem in the syllabus. One of the most difficult poems. That is the Big Match 1983 by Yasmin Punaratna, where we have 7 stanzas to discuss. Right? So very difficult poem. Hurry up and write down. Right, okay. I hope that you guys have completed. We will move on. Right, very good. He is not ready to reveal what kind of issues are bothering him, even though his wife acts the role of the clown inside the house, right? Do you think even if he exposes his issues, his wife will react to them? If she can't understand the difference between the entertainer and husband, how can she help him with his issues? Now, this is the problem. So we have a kind of a logical argument here. So he never reveals, he never exposes his problems to his wife. Now, what you can realize here, my dear students, is that even if he reveals that, let's come to a logical argument, right? Okay. Even if he reveals that, do you think that this particular wife can give answers to these problems? No, you will say that no, sir, he will find some kind of solace, right, by explaining his problems to his wife. But at the end of the day, right, this particular wife won't understand. There is no point of telling. And most importantly, I have highlighted this. What is that? I have said, if she can't understand the difference between the entertainer and husband, how can she help him with his issues? If this particular woman can't understand the difference between the husband and the entertainer, or else the human being and the entertainer, how am I supposed to think that, okay, this wife will definitely understand the problems actually faced by him? No. I think he knew the reality. And most importantly, this wife is actually uneducated. That is also something important. We discussed about that related to these grammar mistakes. Very good. We discussed about that. Can you understand? Right. So he may think about that perspective as well. Even if I tell my problems to my wife, right, nothing will happen. It will make no difference, right? So that is what I have highlighted. He knew this reality, and that is why he did not bother to express himself. The contrast is furthermore highlighted here to show the duality of clown's life, which is not realized by the clown's wife. So very beautiful rhyming can be seen here, right? The contrast is furthermore highlighted here to show the duality of the clown's life, which is not realized by clown's wife. So what we can realize here is that the reality is not actually understood by the clown's wife. That is what we can highlight. Hurry up and write down. Please pass me a message if you have finished. So we are going to end this particular question. Very good. Where we have completed one target question, and next week we can go for another target question. Once you realize after completing target questions, most of the questions are actually based on the themes, right? So if you know the theme, you can very easily understand this. Right. If you have finished, please pass me a message to the hurry up. Right. How many of you have completed? Right. Okay. Very good. Right. We will move on. But he doesn't say exactly how he feels, doesn't say what is bothering him inside. Just sits there saying almost to himself, "Oh life, our life, what would I do without this clown of a wife?" The realization of the audience is quite clear with the above supported evidence from the poem where Agad has utilized metaphors, similes, visual imagery, and powerful diction usage of words to show the contrast between the entertainer and the human vividly throughout the poem. So this is my last explanation, right? From that we are going to wind up the session. So today we discussed about target question. We discussed one target question, and we discussed what do you mean by this contrast and how contrast is actually brought into the poem using irony, right? Where we have discussed about the entertainer's role. On the other hand, we have discussed about the human's role. Yeah, in the poem, we have discussed that as the clown's role and the husband's role. So according to wife, we can clearly see some kind of a difference in both these roles. And we have actually written our answer based on that, right? So finally, we can understand the realization will be there for the audience. It's quite clear that with the above supported evidence from the poem, where Agad has utilized metaphors, similes, and visual images, especially powerful diction and contrast, especially irony, you can say irony, situational irony, to show the contrast between the entertainer and the human vividly throughout the poem, right? So from there, we are going to wind up the session. So next week, we will discuss more about this particular question, and tomorrow you will have classes. Make sure to join 1 o'clock, use the same link, and we will meet tomorrow. Thank you so much. Have a nice day.